Hey, how's it going? On this episode of Home Water Dispatch, we're in my basement. And I've just been getting my gear together to go down to Cape Cod to go fly fish for some striped bass. And was really reflecting on the choices I make as an angler when it comes to the weight of the rod and the weight of the line and the type of flies that I use and whether I crimp the barbs and all that interesting stuff. And wanted to use this episode of Home Water Dispatch to reflect and share a bit about some science that came out of my lab over the last couple of years that looked specifically at how striped bass respond to catch and release. As a scientist, we dive into the literature ahead of time, look at all the other studies that have been done on catch and release for striped bass, and there really aren't that many. And so we really wanted to look at the way striped bass responded to catch and release and dissect differences between fish that are caught on conventional gear, fish that are caught on fly fishing gear, and to think about all the different elements of the angling event that go into when an angler catches a striped bass, including air exposure. And so looking back on all these other past studies, air exposure wasn't really taken into consideration explicitly. And so that's where we wanted to make that difference, because when you go out to the Cape or when you go into Long Island Sound and you're looking at somebody on a boat catching a striped bass, they're air exposing those fish. We know that fish don't breathe out of water. We know that can have an impact on their performance and their post-release mortality broadly. And so that's why we wanted to do this deeper dive when it came to striped bass, catch and release, and include air exposure. So here's obviously my basement. My gear's a little disorganized, but you know what? I know where it all is. And so I really wanted to take this opportunity. This is a part of a presentation that I've been giving to angling clubs. And I gave this presentation to the New England Fly Tires earlier this week. And it spawned a whole bunch of great discussions. It spawned a lot of great insights and really fired up anglers to think about how they're going to make a difference the next time they catch a striped bass. And so to explain a little bit more, I know this is probably backwards on the screen. I have no idea whether it will be. We'll see after when I post this. But I decided to pull my slides together and cut this sort of makeshift screen. And hopefully the furnace doesn't go off. If the furnace goes off, I'm kind of screwed. It might be kind of noisy. Anyway, we'll try to get this done quickly. So what we do when we do our science, when we look at catch and release, is we look at all different, oh my God, this isn't going to work. We look at all different aspects of the angling event. So even if you can't read it, maybe you can. Gear type, hook location, fight time, total length of the fish, handling time. We had, for this particular study, we had 5 different air exposure treatments. So we had fish that, we had fish that weren't exposed to air, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and 120 seconds. And we measured water temperature because fish are ectotherms and their metabolism responds to changes in water temperature. So when you're doing a catch and release study, you got to measure water temperature. And so we worked with a whole bunch of anglers. So that's, we go out and this is sort of beyond citizen science. Next slide, please, Mr. Danilchuk. And so we use this research angler approach. This was done a couple of years ago, over 2 successive seasons, where we worked with like Cape Cod Salties, Cape Cod Fly Rodders, Osterville Angling Club. We worked at the Cheeky Schoolie tournament when fish were being caught. We assessed the way they responded to catch and release. We quantified all that data, which is kind of nutty. Anglers probably don't do that, but we do, because we want to figure out what are the best practices that we can put back in the hands of the anglers. So we also had support from a whole bunch of nonprofits and some industry folks down here that helped out. And this research angler approach is a little bit different than citizen science because we work side by side with anglers. And that way we can ensure the highest quality of the data that's being produced. The other thing that we did, so when these fish were being caught and released, we use something called reflex impairment, so or sometimes called ramp. And fish, just like us, when you go to the doctor and they smack you in the knee and your knee goes whoop, that's a reflex. Fish also have reflexes. I'm not going to go into all the detailed ones here that we used, but we used 5 reflexes, including one called righting reflex. This is not a striped bass, this is a plastic trout. You know, and so one amazing reflex that was included in our research was whether the fish could right itself in 3 seconds or less. You turn it upside down, can it right itself? Because of the coordinated fin movements. We need coordinated fin movements in order to swim like a fish upright. And so what we did is we measured those reflex impairments, 5 of them, when the fish was initially landed. So fighting the striped bass on the end of the line, brought it to the side of the boat or to the shoreline, and we measured those 5 reflexes. And then we took the fish out of the water for all those fish that had air exposure treatments. You know, we looked at the hook placement, we measured how long the fish was. We did everything else that we probably would normally do as an angler. And then we reassessed those reflexes when the fish was being released. So we could start to dissect the effects of the fight versus the effects of handling on the disposition of the fish at release. Pretty cool. And we've done that for a lot of other species beyond striped bass. And it's a kind of a tried and true method that my lab and some other labs and lots of other scientists are starting to use to look at the effects of capture and handling on fish. All right. And so you might already guess that with all those things that we're measuring, all those different elements of the angling event, it can be kind of complex in terms of the analyses. And we can look at things one at a time. I won't torture you. So this is, I also promised when I give these presentations to angling clubs, you know, we can what's called a kind of a univariate way. We look at one factor versus another over and compare how they're responding. So again, you probably can't, oh, they're getting the camera in their way. You apparently, maybe you can. So we've got the y-axis, we have the x-axis, we have fight time along the x-axis for this graph, proportion of ramp scores at the time of release. Greater the fight time, ramp scores go down. Water temperature, greater the water temperature, ramp scores go down. Handling time, ramp scores go down. The more fish that were caught with conventional gear had lower reflexes than fish that were caught via fly fishing. And then when you look at the duration of air exposure, we see that the reflex impairments really took a big dive after 60 seconds. So we can look at this one at a time, and then, but it's often hard as an angler or as a fishing guide to prioritize. So which ones are going to have the greatest effect? At how do we tease apart all these differences to help anglers make the best decisions possible on the fly? And if they had to prioritize, which best practices should they use? And so this is when we used a sophisticated analysis called a decision tree. And again, it's going to be really hard to see on the screen here, but the long and short of it is that it takes all of the data and starts to allow sort of these bifurcations. That's a really weird, a split in the data. And the first split is air exposure. So air exposure matters. 120 seconds, you can see here, a lot of those fish that were exposed for 120 seconds had a high reflex impairment, or decrease in reflex impairment. Those other fish, the next thing was total length, right? And so total length, size of the fish matters. We've seen that in other studies with other species, that the larger the fish, they tend to be a little bit more susceptible to the stresses that are imposed when we're fighting them and handling them. So for the size of the fish, the next thing, the split, handling time over here. So handling time matters. And then hook type over here. The hook type, we had double hooks and then single hooks. So fishing with a double hook, so like, and this is more on the conventional side, in terms of plugs with double hooks, What happens is it increases handling time, of course, because you got to take especially if they're treble hooks, you're taking more time to get those treble hooks out. And this is when water temperature started to really play an effect. So at higher water temperatures, if you're fishing with a double hook and on conventional gear, man, those fish the reflex impairments increased with higher water temperatures. Now, thinking back to me going down to the Cape and the Cheeky Schoolie tournament and people loving to fly fish for striped bass, this is when you come down here, single hook on fly fishing. Here's fly fishing over here. Fight time matters, and so those fish that were caught that fought on the line for longer periods of time had greater reflex impairment. This goes back to that decision making that we make, that I'm making when I'm getting ready to go down to Cape Cod. So when I started fly fishing for striped bass, that my standard was straight 20-pound fluorocarbon or hard mono, whatever. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. And so 20-pound was my standard. But based on this science and based on the way that striped bass respond to catch and release, there's a suggestion. We got to work harder. Move up to 25, maybe move up to 30, right? And try to horse those, learn how to fight those fish harder, bring them in, maybe try going up in your tippet or leader size so you're less fearful about breaking them off, and essentially fight them harder, bring them to hand, turn the hook if it's barbless, and let them go. Don't air expose them. Reduce handling time. It's particularly important if it's a big fish. Bigger fish, again, more susceptible to the stresses related to catch and release. And so the bigger the fish, the more aware that we need to be about these different aspects of the angling event. I'm not going to get into some other stuff I shared about. So to summarize it, I've been going on for a while. This isn't a lecture. It's just kind of hopefully trying to encourage people to think about the gear that they select when they're going down to fish for striped bass. To improve post-release outcomes, you want to reduce fight time. You want to reduce handling time and air exposure. You want to, and so that's these two together. And then at higher water temperatures, and for those larger fish, we don't want to take them out of the water. And we also want to fight them harder and bring them to hand and turn the hook and let them go. So those are the things that we really need to focus on. Those are the things that are sort of guiding or informing best practices for catch and release of striped bass. And so when you're getting ready to head down to the shore to go fish for striped bass on fly, man, size up on your tippet or leader. Maybe instead of using an 8-weight, use a 9-weight rod. Yes, you might pop a fish off if you have to fight it harder, but you know what? It's better for the fish in the end. And so what I'll do for this episode of Home Water Dispatch, I'm also going to put links to the couple of the articles, the research papers that came out of the science from my lab related to that sort of leads into these best practices. So head on, check out that in the description. And I hope this has been helpful. All right. Yeah, have fun on the water and stay tuned for another episode of Home Water Dispatch at some point when it moves me to do so. See ya.